the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. A screeching U-turn from Rishi Sunak today. In fact, it's a U-turn on about 35 years of government policy. But is it a vote winner? We'll discuss all sides of that debate. The debanking latest after yesterday's farce from the FCA. We'll talk to the British shooting industry, who are being debanked in the most astonishing numbers. And sticking with the countryside, British agriculture is on its knees. Are the supermarkets now friends or foes of our farmers? We'll debate all of that and more, but that'll follow the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story tonight is that the Prime Minister has set out this afternoon revised plans to his net zero in a controversial overhaul of the government's green policies. Among the measures was a weakening of the phasing out of gas boilers, as well as easing the transition to electric vehicles by pushing back a ban on new petrol and diesel cars until 2035. Rishi Sunak said he wants a more realistic approach to net zero, which eases the burden on the British people.
Our destiny can be our own choosing, but only if we change the way our politics works. Can we be brave in the decisions we make, even if there is a political cost? Can we be honest when the facts change, even if it's awkward? And can we put the long-term interests of our country before the short-term political needs of the moment, even if it means being controversial?
Well, that was just a couple of hours ago, but already the move has ignited quite a significant backlash. More than 250 charities and businesses have been urging the government not to weaken green targets. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says the Prime Minister's decision puts pressure now on households.
It reveals Rishi Sunak is very weak. He's being pushed around by Liz Truss and he's causing chaos. This is a set of announcements which is undermining business investment in this country, is undermining the stability of our economy, and it's actually going to cost consumers more.
Well, away from net zero, the government's plan to deal with inflation is working, according to the Chancellor. The rate of inflation fell to 6.7% in August. That's down from 6.8% in July. The Bank of England had predicted the figure to increase to more than 7%. It comes ahead of another expected interest rate rise tomorrow. Consultants and junior doctors took unprecedented industrial action today, joining together to strike, manning picket lines as well during a walkout over pay. Thousands of BMA medics stopped work at NHS hospitals across England, delaying operations and placing more pressure on the NHS. And finally, the King and Queen are in France as part of a 3-day state visit, celebrating shared history, culture and values. They were greeted in France, in Paris, in fact, by the President Emmanuel Macron and his wife at a ceremony of remembrance at the Arc de Triomphe before heading off to the Élysée Palace for talks. And this evening, the royal couple's been attending a state banquet at the Palace of Versailles. We have wind as well of a host of celebrities in attendance this evening, including Hugh Grant, Didier Drogba, football star, Patrick Vieira and others. We'll report on that later. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, it all happened as a result of a leak. My guess is this was going to be Rishi Sunak's big conference speech in the first week of October up in Manchester, but it leaked and he decided, well, I may as well own it. So a major speech from the Prime Minister at 4:30 today. And it is a very significant speech. You know, ever since the late 1980s, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, we've been talking about environmental policy. It led through to the Kyoto Agreement, on to Paris, and then, of course, on to the Boris Johnson government wanting to be the greenest ever with the really, for some of us, mad rush towards net zero. Now, Sunak says we are keeping our commitments. We're sticking with the Paris Agreement. Nothing is changing, just the methodology and the practicality. What were the big standouts from today's speech? Well, firstly, you will still be able to buy a new petrol or diesel car up until 2035, not the original cut-off of 2030. He's promised no new green taxes for air travel. On boiler upgrades, the subsidy goes from £5,000 per household to £7,500 per household. And he says that energy certificates will not become more difficult for households. There's a whole mass of things here. There's even promises not to put taxes on meat. These are very, very major changes. But they bring quite big questions, namely, what are the divisions within the Conservative Party over this? Boris Johnson already not very happy. Lord Zach Goldsmith perhaps even on the verge of resigning, I think, from the Conservative Party. He's made it clear we'll go on exploring for oil and gas in the North Sea. There could be up to 150 MPs who do not like this, Tory MPs, who do not like this one little bit. So he's going to face some real challenges. And yet, my sense of this is going to prove to be pretty popular for him, and in particular, in the Red Wall seat. So let me ask you, is this a vote winner? Give me your thoughts, Farage at gbnews.com. Well, let's go to the Red Wall right now. Let's go to Dudley and let's speak to Marco Longhi, the Conservative Member of Parliament from Dudley North, who, of course, won that seat. And you are a classic Red Wall seat. Spent a lot more time as Labour than Conservative. Do you believe that your Prime Minister has done the right thing today?
Well, good evening, Nigel. It's always a pleasure to join you on your show. You know that. Yes, I believe this is a fantastic thing Rishi has done. I have felt almost unwell at times at the eco-zealotry sometimes that has been coming from even some of my own colleagues, completely disregarding those working class people who are disproportionately having to face the huge costs and impracticalities that were also involved with them. Now, Rishi has been very clear today that he is not saying he doesn't want to achieve net zero. He is not reducing the ambitions that we want, which is all to have a greener planet. But the way we are going to roll that out is going to be in a much fairer, more pragmatic way. And this is definitely what Dudley people want.
So does this allow the Conservatives to say, look, if you're on average income or below, you're a pensioner, that actually we, the Conservative Party, are on the side of the poorest, as opposed to a Labour Party who have just brought in, for example, the ULEZ extension in London, will go on subsidising wind energy to a huge degree. Is this a big piece of positioning ahead of the next general election?
Oh, without question, to my mind, this is definitely positioning, and it's one that I've been pushing for almost from day one. You know, this is something I've almost felt unwell about, and this is not a teaspoonful of medicine; it's a huge tablespoonful of medicine for me. This is huge news, and I'm really, really pleased. Look, I have 2 young daughters. I'm hoping to be a grandfather one day. I want a greener planet, but it's the way that we were going about it before that was just completely unrealistic. And we've been leading the world. That is absolutely true. But we've been so ahead of our own targets that we can now afford to actually look at this again and do it in a more pragmatic way.
Oh, Marco, we've led the world brilliantly. We've just sacked 3,000 steelworkers over the course of the weekend in the name of going green. No, we've certainly led the world. How big is the rebellion going to be within your party at your conference in Manchester?
I genuinely don't know. I mean, look, all I would say is that the policies that we had before were policies designed by very well-off members of parliament, standing in very well-off constituencies that don't have to deal with the sort of problems that I have on my council house estates and many of the red wall seats, but well beyond the red wall. You know, I have seen comments coming from conservative WhatsApp groups. Not a single one is coming out as negative so far. So this is very significant. And I must make the point that, you know, the Prime Minister is very clear. We all want a greener planet in the future, but the way we are going about it is going to be very different, much more proportionate and much fairer to people. That's the key thing.
Marco Longhi, thank you for joining me once again on this show on GB News. Well, joining me with extraordinary timing is Matt Goodwin, pollster and Professor of Politics at the University of Kent. I'm also joined by Quentin Wilson, former Top Gear presenter and campaigner for low emission and electric cars. Matt, I can't believe your luck, really. You've commissioned a piece of polling that you said you would exclusively reveal on this programme before we even knew that Rishi Sunak was going to give this speech. And you've been polling attitudes towards some of these green ideas, and in particular, attitudes of motorists to the way government are talking to them. So the big headline, I suppose, in many ways, is this 2030 to 2035, the 5-year slippage. And, you know, you can buy electric cars at any time, but equally you can buy new diesel and petrol cars from 30 to 35. When you polled that, what did the public say?
Well, as your previous guest just said, Nigel, among the key groups of voters for Rishi Sunak, this policy is very popular. Among all voters across the country, 50% are opposed to banning petrol and diesel cars by 2030. Only a third of them support it. But look at these key groups that Rishi Sunak has to win back. Opposition, 63% among Brexiteers, 63% among Boris Johnson's 2019 voters, 64% among the working class. Middle-class professionals support it. Workers oppose it. And crucially, pretty much everybody over the age of 50, again, key Conservative voters typically that Rishi needs to win back, they really don't like some of this net zero stuff. So look, just put what you're seeing on social media to one side for a minute. If he is to stand any chance of winning the next election, appealing to those key groups is what he has to do, and they're going to like this stuff.
Now, I live right on the edge of Kent and Greater London, the furthest point from central London where they put ULEZ cameras. I've never seen such local anger over an issue. Not just because it hits pensioners and it hits people with their, you know, they're self-employed with their delivery vans. Even those that have got newer cars just think it's wrong and it's unfair and not going to achieve anything. Overall, I mean, there are 37 million of us that drive cars. You polled attitudes towards whether, you know, environmental-related taxes and penalties on motorists have gone too far.
Yeah. So, again, we find that a large plurality of voters, about coming up to half the country, think environmental penalties and fees on motorists have gone too far. Only about 1 in 5 people in the country think they're about right. Now, I've written extensively, as you know, about why I think this issue is going to become one of the next big rebellions in British politics, because, as I've just shown you with the polling, what you're seeing is a more affluent, professional, city-based political media, cultural class advocating lots of these policies, but many workers, many pensioners, many squeezed voters, many people in the smaller towns and the coastal communities committees are looking at some of this stuff, and as the Prime Minister said today, you know, they just can't make sense of it. They say, well, why am I being asked to pay this? Why do I have to pay £12.50 every time I get in my non-compliant car and drive it around?
And I guess, Quentin Wilson, that's the point in a way, isn't it? I mean, if you're Lord Zach Goldsmith and worth a fortune, then electric cars are great because it's just a little bit of pocket money. But when we've already got people, you know, struggling like crazy with ULEZ, isn't this 5-year extension of the ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars? It brings us into line, actually, with where Germany have gone and many other countries. Is this not, politically, we'll talk about the business angle in a minute, is it not a simple, pragmatic, straightforward move?
ULEZ was a mistake, and it's kind of weaponised air quality and environmental issues. And it was, you know, I said at the time, this is completely wrong-headed. So we've got this real polarisation in society now, and the motoring lobby is being courted by Sunak. But we will lose our place on the world stage if Marco said that we're ahead. You said we're ahead. We're not. We've
deindustrialised
away by
China. We've deindustrialised.
No, but look. America,
isn't net zero about deindustrialising?
Net zero is about making as much as we can for jobs and economic activity in the UK. That's the opportunity that we face. And Jeremy Hunt said it was £1 trillion opportunity. Now they've changed their tune. And we've seen this whole tirade today from all these businesses saying, why are you doing this? Why are you pulling the rug from underneath us?
And this is important, and I fully understand this point. There are businesses that have been gearing up for the 2030 date, but equally, they can make their cars and hopefully make their batteries.
They'll make them somewhere else, Nigel.
Well, why would they make them somewhere else?
Because a better environment, a more economically friendly environment, an environment with...
Where?
Europe, America, you know, where
But I mean, Germany is 2035 as well.
Yeah, but look, that's because the German, you know, car industry didn't want it. We have this ability now to catch up with the rest of the world when it comes to electric cars and battery factories. 25 battery factories in Europe being built and planned. We've got 1.5, and the one we've been, the second one, the JLR Stellantis, 4 billion. That could disappear because of this, because there's no certainty in industrial policies. I'm talking about jobs, I'm talking about prosperity, I'm talking about clean air, cheaper energy.
Well, I'm talking about jobs. 3,000 steel workers gone at the weekend. Why? We're getting rid of the same coal blast furnaces used all over the world. We're moving to electric arc, which recycles second-hand steel. We've stopped being a primary steel producer. That's madness from a strategic point of view.
I'm not a steel expert, but...
No, but the point I'm making is that we have actually got rid of a lot of heavy industries in the name of going green.
Because they don't...
We have had the most expensive electricity prices. We've lost both our aluminium smelters. We've gone for wind energy. We've put masses on people's bills. I mean, really, I think what Professor Goodwin is saying here with these numbers is interesting. And it is that if you go to what we call working-class voters, a lot of 2019 Tories, a lot of people for whom the cost of living crisis is very, very real, that you see these very large majorities who think, actually, what Sunak's done today is the right thing. We have to recognise these people, don't we?
We do, and we need to help their futures and give them jobs and help them retrain, and those jobs to be highly skilled and highly paid. But Sunak was disingenuous in the sense there was no policy for meat, no policy for car sharing, no policy for 7 bins and an aviation tax. You know, he is electioneering here, Nigel. You know this,
I get it.
I know it.
I get it, yeah.
And what we're doing is short-term opportunism against a long-term future for our children. And that's what's so craven about this.
The other thing I would say to you is this, that the biggest Chinese energy producer, Guaneng, probably a bad pronunciation, they produce more carbon dioxide. One Chinese company produces more carbon dioxide than the whole of the UK.
I know, look...
The whole of the UK.
1% of
yeah, if that.
Yeah, I know. But, look, we can use this technology, use our expertise, use our skills to sell it to other countries. And that's what we need to do now, because we're in such a dire economic state. What Sunak didn't mention is $100 a barrel for oil. That's what hurts working people the most. What are we going to do about that, Nigel?
No, you're right. Oil was $95 yesterday, and it's the highest it's been for some time.
And it's been pushed up by Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. Equally, electricity has been very expensive on households through subsidy.
It needs to come down.
You say it's short-term opportunism, but is it a vote winner for him?
It may be, but I think the rest of the world will look on and say, this was your defining moment. This was your U-turn, your flip-flop, and possibly the biggest mistake of your political career.
300,000 people have now signed the petition in Wales against 20-mile-an-hour speed limits.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there is a big lobby there.
Schools, hospitals, roads with pedestrians.
Okay, so we agree on that.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, you, Les, on that, we do agree on very strongly. Final thought, Professor Goodwin, is this a vote winner for Sunak?
I think it's going to go down very well among the key groups of voters that he needs to win back. It's not enough on its own. He needs the small vote numbers to come down. He needs inflation to come down. He needs a sense of economic optimism to kick in among voters out there. But, yeah, they're going to like this. And London might not, but many of his voters will.
In a moment, we continue this. We talk about Hurricane Nigel, which is making its way across the Atlantic, and I'll be joined by Jim Dale, who I think also feels a bit upset about what the government have done today.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Boy, this issue really matters. We have had many more emails in the first 50 minutes of this programme than we normally get. I asked you simply, is this a vote winner? Is Sunak on the right track? Danny says he's going in the right direction, but it needs to go further. Big business will now kick back against him, as they did with the Trust budget. Yeah, I think big business will. Another viewer says this screeching U-turn is about as dramatic as the average parish council meeting. Fiddling around the edges will not win my vote. We need a referendum. Well, there are quite a lot of people thinking that maybe a referendum on net zero would be a good idea, because one of the problems has been you get almost the entirety of Westminster agree with the policy, and the voters don't get a choice at the election. And finally, Dorothy says, I agree with Rishi. Why should we be world leaders when we can't afford it? Dorothy, we have been world leaders. We have really reduced our carbon emissions to a remarkable degree, not that it makes much difference globally. But we'll discuss all of that right now with Jim Dale, senior meteorologist with British Weather Services and author of the book Surviving Extreme Weather. Now, Jim, we're going to start with your day job, being a meteorologist.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Rather than a climate camp.
Yeah.
Hurricane Nigel. Tell us all about it.
Well, we spoke about it about 2 weeks ago, didn't we? Saying this might happen.
Yes,
and
we did.
we're up to the letter N. So Nigel is out there wallowing around in the middle of the Atlantic, shouting off, and it's actually about. I think it's around about a 2 now. Hurricane
he couldn't
2.
resist it, could
no,
he couldn't resist
well,
it.
there's more to come because it will wallow around and it will move towards the UK towards the weekend, and just after it to the north of Scotland. Makes a lot of noise, flattering to deceive, you might say, and eventually blows itself out.
Well, I haven't blown myself out yet.
No, actually, on the north coast of Scotland, there'll be a lovely big surf out there for places like Thurso. What have you, any surfers listening in, that's the place to go over the course of the weekend.
Okay.
Just after.
So it's not going to be a serious storm.
Well, we watch and wait. I mean, you have to in these situations. It won't be a hurricane by then, make that absolutely clear. It'll be fading away, but nonetheless, it'll have a lot of intensity still with it. The oceans out there are very warm, more than they have been for centuries, and that's giving it power. That energy, it gives it the lift that it needs and produces arguably more rainfall. We've seen that already this week in terms of some of the low-pressure systems that have come in, ex-hurricanes, in terms of Lee and Margot. The intensity of rain is something to be concerned about, because that puts. I mean, we saw it in Exeter, didn't we? Exeter Airport and places like this. We keep our eyes on this. This is the cutting edge of meteorology. The day-to-day stuff can be a bit boring. I do a little bit more than that on my day job.
It's not boring. We're obsessed with it.
We are. The British are obsessed with weather, and it's a fantastic thing because you know what? The weather is the most important factor, bar nothing, in our life. It dictates everything that we do. Everything that from what we eat to what we wear, how we feel, our mental state, you name it. Even sports performances, for example, sports betting. So I do work for a sports betting company. That's what I do in the morning half the time, doing global stuff and making sure that they've got the information about what's going on in rugby and cricket and things like this. So integrity, it's a massive part of our lives, and it should never be underestimated. And to be frank with you, this last couple of years, irrespective of climate change, but probably a large part of it, it's never been so busy in my life in terms of what's been going on from place to place. I'm talking now globally, not necessarily in the UK, although UK has had its moments in terms of last year, the 40 degree we saw in July, August time, and this year in terms of June being a record month.
Now, is this book on weather, or is it climate change?
This is my first book. It's about 3 years old now. But actually, and I've actually donate it to you, to Nigel. It changes minds.
Right. Well, I'm always happy to have my
a good little read of it.
I will.
It's a nice.
I will.
It's a nice. A nice little ditty read. It's easy. It's an easy read, and a bedtime read, if you like.
Now, whatever the truth or otherwise, of rising levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the impact that may or may not have on the environment, and there are people that will argue different ends of this. I know what you believe very strongly, as most of the establishment does believe, that CO2 is leading to a warmer climate and climate change. But I made the point earlier with Quentin Wilson, one Chinese energy company, one company, produces more CO2 a year than Britain. And no one is suggesting that we should be irresponsible and we should pump out nitrous oxide and all these things. No one. I'm an environmentalist. I want us to be sensible. But I put it to you, Jim Dale, that what Rishi Sunak has done today is pragmatic and sensible.
I put it to you, it's a political move. It's nothing to do with net zero. In fact, it's not zero, as far as I'm concerned, looking at what he's did. He's straddling a fence. And I think the fence is there to be broken, if you like. In other words, he's going to fall off it, because I don't think he's either side of that. You could argue he's stuck with the net zero promise in the Conservative manifesto. But his record in terms of new oil and gas licences, in terms of the speed of move, if you like, he's not going fast enough, certainly as far as I'm concerned. I want this country to lead this like we did in the Industrial Revolution.
We have been, Jim.
Well,
we have been. We have reduced CO2 output more than anybody else at a cost of a huge number of jobs.
And we can carry on doing that, and there's countries that are far better than...
Keep sacking the steel workers.
You create...
3,000 at the weekend. 3,000 well-paid jobs.
You can create more jobs. This is the future. We have to look on the horizon and lead these things. This is a massive opportunity for this country to actually lead. For once, in the last 100 years, we've let the Industrial Revolution slip away beneath our fingers, if you like.
You believe that, and the Labour Party have pushed this, and Joe Biden in America's pushed this. Do you genuinely believe that the so-called Green Revolution will give us more jobs than we had before?
In the end, it will take time. But we don't want to be last. Because if we're last, if we're bringing up the rear, we're going backwards.
How are we last? We've got more of those. We've got more of those disgusting wind turbines in our seas.
You say
than any
disgusting.
Other. They're vile.
I think they're very well.
They're vile.
From a
aesthetic point of view.
Yeah, an aesthetic point of view.
Vile.
I quite like them, but I mean that's
pretty
another. Pretty or not.
Pretty or not, right? Pretty or not. We've got more seaward turbines than any other country in the world. How are we behind?
We do well in certain categories. That's
until the wind stops blowing. Then what?
I mean, we take heat pumps for example. Heat pumps are far more forward in terms of for the Scandinavian countries, for example. They would be, wouldn't they? They're freezing cold countries, and for 6 months of the year, they want to move in that direction. We've just got to use our innovation. We're an innovative country. I don't want to knock anybody on this and say, you know, that we shouldn't be moving in this direction. We should be moving. It's for the pioneers, the industrialists, those that can better people than me, maybe better people than you in terms of the scientists of this world, and the scientists are being knocked back here.
I don't
the likes
mind.
of NASA and what have you.
Jim, I don't mind. You know, the idea that we can be in the lead with modern technology and all the rest of it. Well, as you said yourself, that's exactly what we did in the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago. Problem is, with all of this, it's the poor that are paying the bill.
If we talk about the poor, this is where the motor side of it comes in. They talk about the poor.
Yeah, they're paying the bill.
Well, actually, most of the poor don't even own a car. Let's make that absolutely clear.
Transference of money from poor to rich over the last 25 years, as we've slapped 20% extra on their electricity bills, and that money's gone to giant multinational foreign companies. It's wrong.
Giant multinational oil and gas companies.
No, Chinese companies making wind turbines, Danish companies owning wind turbines.
Equally, if there is a financial problem, let's knock on the door of those that have, to a degree, created the problem, the fossil fuel companies themselves. They are rolling in it. BP, for example, made £5 billion profit in the first 3 months of this year.
They're now paying 75% tax, and as a result of that...
Good on
As a result of that. So you believe in that, do you?
I believe that they are the responsible in the main, and governments for their reluctance to move forward. They are responsible for the CO2 that's being released and other gases into this atmosphere. This is why this subject of weather and climate has suddenly become number one.
I mean, you know, we're going to burn...
Virtually.
I mean, the world's going to burn 8 billion tonnes of coal this year. 8 billion tonnes. We are just a tiny part of this.
But we can. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you could have the best house in your street, if you like, and you could have the prettiest garden, everybody around you. Do you give that up because everybody else is doing the wrong thing? I don't think so. I think you've got to look beyond that and say to your neighbour, actually, your garden's a bit rubbish compared to mine, and I'll show you how to make this better.
Well, if you can convince China and India and Indonesia to make their gardens pretty...
No, well, go on, you do that. Maybe we should go over there and try and convince them ourselves.
Well, I tell you what, Jim, and viewers and listeners, the one thing we do absolutely pride ourselves on here at GB News is making sure you hear all sides of the argument, and they're put with great passion. In a moment, another subject very close to my heart, debanking. We talked about the FCA report yesterday, what a farce it was. In a moment, we'll talk about debanking that's happening to a perfectly legal industry in this country, shooting. Back with you in 2.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Three months ago, when I came out, as it were, as having been debanked, suddenly it led to a tidal wave of people getting in touch with me via my website to say, we've been debanked too. And I now try and push them towards accountclosed.org, where at least we've got some admin support. One group of people that I had so many impassioned letters from were those involved in a perfectly legal hobby and industry, that of shooting. And it went for people who were manufacturing shotguns, buying shotguns, using shotguns, shops that were selling shotguns, and it was clear a lot of them were being debanked. I don't think I'd quite realised the scale of the problem. And shooting is an important industry in this country, whether it's clays or whether it's game shooting, which kind of really kicks off at this time of the year and is very, very important to parts of Devon and Cornwall and the north of England. Something big is going on here, at least I think there is. I'm now joined by a man who will tell me what the extent of this is. I'm joined by Dr. Conor O'Gorman, Head of Policy and Campaigns at the British Association for Shooting and Conservation. So, Conor, being there at the BASC, you will get a lot more feedback on this than I will. To what extent have people involved in the shooting industry suffered from debanking?
Well, good evening. We know there are hundreds of cases out there, and more people are coming forward. So we've been dealing with this issue for years, and we thought we were the only ones affected. So obviously, in the last few months, as news has emerged of the wider aspects to debanking, more of our members are coming forward. People don't want to come forward on a thing like this. They think they're the only ones. They think they're the only victims. So it's good now that it's out in the open that there's nothing. You've done nothing wrong if you've been debanked because you're a gun shop or because you're a shooting ground or you're a game shoot. Come to BASC, tell us your experiences, and we'll help out. And that's been happening. So over the last few months, we've had more and more people coming forward with recent examples of debanking and current issues. So we're dealing with current issues as well, and we're advising on that. And I think we're learning as we go along, all of us, because I think as per the FCA interim report that was published yesterday, we're only scratching the surface of this. There's so much.
No, I think, Conor, I mean, one of the good things I've done here is by admitting this had happened to me, it, as you say, has made it much easier for other people who either felt alone or frankly felt a bit humiliated and embarrassed about coming forward. Now, one of the figures I read was that perhaps as much as 40% of registered commercial shoots had suffered debanking. Do you believe it's as big as that?
Yes, so we did so as I said, for years and years, BASC, British Association for Shooting and Conservation, has been helping individual members on a case-by-case basis. And in 2021, we decided to try and look for patterns on this, and we did a survey, put out a survey out there to the members. We had 325 responses, and 41% of those respondents said they had an issue. So we looked at all the data that had come in from the survey, and we couldn't find any pattern to this. Decisions were random from bank to bank, and all the banks were involved. And we're still trying to figure this out. And what it seems to me, and every case today that comes forward to us is another piece of the jigsaw as regards what exactly is going on. I mean, for example, at the moment we've been helping out a clay shooting ground in England who were recently had their bank account closed by Bank A, let's say, with no notice. They've now successfully got Bank B to open an account for them. But I know of cases with Bank B where they've closed accounts for other shooting grounds or shooting. Well, there's something going on that we. Yeah,
no. I picked this up a couple of months ago myself with members of yours and others getting in touch. Well, please encourage them to put in subject access requests to their banks to try and get as much information as possible. And I would urge you, Conor, as an organisation, if you haven't spoken to the FCA or they've not spoken to you, please get in touch with them. Because, as you say, I felt on the politics of yesterday's report, it was a whitewash, but on everything else, they haven't even scratched the surface. One last very quick point, if I may. A lot of people writing to me saying when they go to get their shotgun licence renewed, they now have to have a medical and that local GPs are refusing to do this.
Yeah, so there's multiple issues that BASC is dealing with regard to the shooting sector, and that's one of those issues. And we deal with policies across lots of different areas, conservation and shooting, and that is an issue. And debanking is another issue. Yeah. So, we're here as a voice of shooting. If people out there aren't members of BASC, please join, please help us. Numbers count.
Absolutely.
We're here to support.
No, well, I know your organisation. I've visited you at the Game Fair a few times over the years, and keep up the good work. Conor, thank you for joining us this evening. And the sector after sector like this, I'm being written to now by a lot of jewellers who are having their bank accounts closed, and I'll keep on this case. Well, What the Farage moment is not only does Starmer go to meet President Macron, a day ahead, of course, of the King and Queen, who are having a grand dinner as we speak in Versailles, in the palace. But it now turns out it was Tony Blair that brokered the deal. Yes, Blair, the great globalist, Blair, the great EU fanatic, doing everything he can to get Britain back into something resembling European Union membership. And this morning, almost uncommented on with so much else going on, the inflation figures came in. They were 6.7%, down just 0.1%. We've got a fair way to go to see whether Rishi Sunak meets his target by the end of the year. The good news is that food inflation is down a little bit. The bad news, of course, is, as we mentioned earlier, is that oil has hit $95 a barrel. Just have a look at the increase in the price at the pumps. Well, talking of food, what is going on with Britain's farmers and their relationship with the supermarkets? It would appear from the founder of River Organic Farmers that actually farming is in very deep crisis and that maybe the supermarkets are the enemy. We'll debate that in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I went to the local supermarket, Waitrose, just a few days ago. I had a few essentials to buy, but I saw there was fruit advertised. Plums. I thought, well, it's September. We're in Kent. Let's get one of these packets of plums. I got them home to discover they were produced in Spain. I simply couldn't believe it. Surely, if ever there was a time to support the fruit industry, it was in September. Well, perhaps that's one of many complaints that Guy Singh Watson, the founder of River Organic Farmers, has got about the supermarkets, because, Guy, you're one of the pioneer of the idea of the vegetable box being delivered door to door. And you've written this Dear Supermarkets letter. It's time to get fair about farming. Now, we have over the years heard about this tussle between whether it's milk producers and supermarkets or whatever it is. What's prompted you to write this letter now?
It's seeing the farmers around me on their knees, and we did a piece of research. Sorry, it's Riverford. We did a bit of a piece of research, and found that in our sector, fruit and vegetables, 50% of farmers, 49% of farmers thought they might not be in business next year, and they cited, 75% of them cited the behaviour of supermarket buyers as being a leading factor. So we're really calling on the supermarkets to treat their suppliers more in the way that Riverford does, that shows some commitment to a long-term relationship. I mean, specifically, that they pay what they said they'd pay, they buy what they said they'd buy, they agree specifications in discussion with growers rather than imposing on them, and that they really invest in long-term relationships with their suppliers rather than every year there being this price negotiation, which if you're a penny out, you're liable to lose the contract, and that's the end of your business.
So you're basically saying they're bully boys?
I am, I'm afraid. You know, there are 6 major buyers, you know, which account for about 85% of the market for farmers, and there are tens of thousands of farmers. It's not surprising with that imbalance of power, that farmers, effectively, as you say, get bullied.
You see, what surprises me about this is this is, aside from the net zero debate, there is a lot more knowledge about food miles, a lot more conversation about the fact there's a benefit of buying things that are produced locally. There's quite a mood, if the price is reasonable, to buy British. And yet, how is it when I bought those plums at Waitrose the other day? There was sort of, produce of Spain was hidden in the bottom right corner. There's a disconnect here, it seems to me.
It is getting a little bit late for UK plums. But, in general, I think the UK British public would like to know where their food has come from. They would like to have information. They'd even like to know who grew it and under what conditions. However, and I think farmers would like to tell that story, and they'd love to have their brand on their produce. But supermarkets have driven the wedge between British farmers and British producers, so that we really don't know where our food comes from. In fact, they've created their own sort of fake farms, sort of fantasy farms, the fake brands, rather than have actually a real UK farmer. And the reason for that is when it comes to that annual negotiation on price, they don't want you to want to buy specifically from that farm, because under the way it is at the moment, they can just say, oh, you're a penny more expensive, we'll go to the next farm.
Yeah, or abroad.
Or abroad, yeah.
Which they do in quite a significant way.
Well, the self-sufficiency in food in the UK has fallen since I started farming in the 80s, when it was stood at about 80%, to mid to low 60s today.
Why?
Well, I mean, we are a high-wage economy, and for some things, obviously, it's climate related. In some instances, it's regulation, though there are plenty of other economies that are equally regulated with farming that do the same way. Yes, I mean, it is just easier to go abroad for many things much of the time. And I suppose, to some extent, changing tastes of people wanting to eat tomatoes, peppers and aubergines rather than cauliflowers and cabbages.
Right, yeah. And I mean, I suppose if you buy at a supermarket, you're not buying seasonally either, are you? Because they want tomatoes there all year round.
You walk into a supermarket and you lose any sense of the seasons. Yes. I mean, it's a very sterile, regimented environment that bears no relationship to a farm.
Now, you've got involved, as I say, as a pioneer with food boxes. Yeah. We've got stores closing, high streets closing, people buying more stuff online. Is that the way forward for British farming?
I think it could be. I think anything that gives farmers an alternative to those big 6 buyers, that sort of empowers them. So that could be a veg box, could be a farmer's market, could be independent retailers, could be new entrants. Actually, I welcome Aldi and Lidl. I think they have stirred it up a bit and brought an alternative. Yeah, they have, and they work on much lower margins, which I have to have a degree of respect for.
Now, we've had a response from Morrison's, and I'll just use Morrison's in this instance, because they were so pleased you were coming on this programme. They really were. And they say, we've worked with generations of farmers. We launched our For Farmers range. It's been there since 2016. And yes, they accept there's a careful balance between keeping prices accessible for customers and ensuring farmers and growers are getting fair returns. Your response to Morrison's?
Why not actually just name the farmers rather than their For Farmers range? It sounds like another own brand to me. Why not empower the farmer by actually saying where it's coming from and naming the farmer on the pack rather than, a For Farmers
One piece
range.
of good news. One piece of good news today, out of what Rishi said, that we're not going to have taxes being put on meat. That must be a little bit of good news.
We do actually have a petition asking for Parliament to review the Grocery Code of Conduct and to make it more legally enforceable. And if people agree with our position and want to support British farmers, they can find that at getfairaboutfarming.co.uk. And it's going really well. Really hope to get to the 100,000 signatories and see it debated in Parliament.
I'll sign it. Guy
Thank you.
Watson, I wish you all the very best, and I genuinely mean that. Now, we don't on this programme, we don't on this channel blow our own trumpet or boast. No, 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 you can go to a very loudmouth presenter on another news channel to get that sort of thing. But yesterday was the first day since GB News was launched that we did across the day get more viewers and more viewing hours than our rivals at the BBC, Sky or Talk TV. So it's been a day of some celebration. Just to give you some idea, our breakfast show yesterday had double the watch time of Sky News and 3 times the share of the BBC News Channel. And this particular show last night had 3 times the average number of viewers as Sky News and almost double the average number of people watching the BBC News Channel. We are making progress here at GB News. I think part of the reason is we do have, as we've done tonight, on the whole issue of what Sunak has said, these reversals on net zero, we make sure that all sides of the argument get represented. And they are debated with passion. There's no question about that. But I think we treat you as a grown-up. Well, one person who certainly treats everybody as a grown-up is Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, who will be picking up the reins with his State of the Nation programme in a moment. Jacob, big day.
It's a very important day. I think today is the day when Rishi Sunak's taken control and has set out a plan that could win him the next general election. I think it's really important. He's broken the net zero consensus that was making people cold and poor. The Labour Party doesn't know where to go, and he is showing himself to be on the side of voters, on the side of British people. It's really important.
But Boris Johnson's not very happy. Lord Zach Goldsmith's incandescent. There are perhaps, I mean, Liz Truss hinted this on Monday, maybe up to 150 backbenchers who are very committed to the net zero idea. I mean, I sense, Jacob, this speech was the speech for conference that got leaked early. How big's the rebellion going to be?
Well, it depends how much has to pass through as legislation.
Yes.
And bear in mind the Labour Party is committed to this. So with Labour votes, greenery always goes through the House of Commons. But actually what matters is the voters. And penalising people for having a petrol car, ULEZ, not being able to get a new gas or oil-fired boiler even sooner, was penalising our voters.
Yeah.
And we are governed by consent.
There you are.
Not the consent for net zero.
The Conservative Party, the party of the poor, the Labour Party, the party of the wealthy. That's how it's shaping up for the next election. I will be back with you tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. First, let's have a look at the autumnal weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkle and here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Some heavy rain across parts of the southeast clearing away overnight, but blustery showers in the northwest and some sunny skies on Thursday. Meanwhile, at the moment we are under the influence of low pressure just to the north of the UK, and we have a cold front lying across southeastern parts, and it's this front that is bringing some intense heavy downpours as we go through the rest of today, gradually clearing away towards the east overnight. Behind it, some clear skies developing though. Notice some showers towards western parts of Wales and England and some hefty rain across the far northwest of the UK. With the clear skies, temperatures are going to dip a little bit lower than some recent nights. Most towns and cities, though, holding up in double figures. Thursday is going to be a brighter, sunnier day than it has been recently, for most of us at least. Some showers already across western and perhaps far southern coastal areas of England and Wales. These becoming more widespread as we go through into the afternoon. Across Scotland and Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud here and some heavy showery rain feeding in, and this could turn thundery at times. Temperatures likely to be a touch down compared to today, but still getting to highs of around 19, possibly 20 Celsius. Through Friday then, it again is going to get off to a largely bright start, but we will see showers becoming widespread as we head into the afternoon. Some of them could still be heavy, perhaps even thundery, and notably still windy across the far northwest. But things are going to ease down as we go through later Friday, so Saturday should get off to a chilly start before the rain returns on Sunday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9